Minister for confirming or clarifying that there's no plans for the government to remove reasonable grounds for stop and search. However, I find it difficult to believe that what he has said is that the police feel less confident with stop and searches. However, the information I've got is that they feel more confident because of the body-worn cameras. But what I'd really like the Minister to tell me is what more he will do to reduce the negative impact stop and search has on young people, especially where they feel shame, embarrassment, they're perceived as criminals, and what more he's doing to build trust within the community and the police.
Well, the Honourable Lady raises an extremely important point, and I thank her for introducing a body-worn video debate, because that is a game changer. That is a game changer in terms of managing the context of a stop and a search in a transparent way. And the fact that we're on track now for 80 odd thousand of these body-worn videos to be deployed across the country, I think underpins our confidence in encouraging the police to do more stop and search in a legal, targeted way. She talks about trust. I think it is absolutely incumbent upon the police and police and crime commissioners in those areas to be highly proactive in engaging with communities, particularly after a Section 60, in terms of explaining the reasons for the Section 60 and what resulted from the Section 60 in terms of consequences, because people need to understand the motivation for a Section 60 or deployment of stop and also be connected to the results of it. I think people want to see action against violent crime. They need the evidence that stop and search is making a contribution to it.
So firstly, I'd like to just say thank you for coming on. You've achieved so much throughout your career. You worked in social work, you were the Deputy Mayor for Lewisham. You're currently in Keir Starmer's shadow cabinet, the Shadow Minister for Faith, Women and Equalities. So thank you for coming on. It'll be great to ask you questions about your life and career and some of the things that are going on at present. So the first question I'd like to ask you is, please tell us about your early life and growing up on the council estate.
Hi, Micah and Michelle. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. I'm really pleased to be here. Yes, I'm Janet Daby, the MP for Lewisham East. And my experience of growing up in the council estate, I grew up in an area called Greenwich, which is off Creek Road. I lived on a housing in a flat in the council estate up until the age of 10, 11, approximately. To be honest, most of the time, it's a really happy, lovely experience that we had. I remember the Queen's Jubilee, and we had a street party, and that was fantastic. I remember lots of close relationships with neighbours and lots of friends, as well as in those days, because it was a while ago, people used to leave their front doors unlocked, you know, and it's a sort of thing where you can't think of ever doing that now. And there was a local Bobby, which we knew really well, and he would knock on the door and come in for a cup of tea. So again, these were very different days, unfortunately, to how many people, especially people from our cultural backgrounds, are experiencing things. But I also remember a door-to-door salesman that would come with a suitcase and knock on the door to see if you want to buy anything out of his suitcase. And hey, you know, now you've got the £1 shops. So although there were so many pleasant memories and great memories, there was also those very disturbing memories. And I think the one the reason why you're asking me is one where we experienced some very obvious, overt racial abuse and discrimination. And that is, I remember coming home from school on a few occasions, really, where we'd come home and we'd walk in the house. The house was dark, and I didn't quite understand why the house was dark. And I remember my mum going to the window, and the window was just covered in eggs. I mean, like totally covered in eggs, like where the house was dark. So somebody had obviously gone to that expense and thought it was a worthwhile expense to try and terrorise us as a family. And what motivated them to do that, one can only think. It didn't come from a good place. And if they were terrorising us, it meant they were terrorising other families, other people, or social activity that they did. So it was a very cruel and monotonous thing to do to somebody. But my mum is a tower of strength and a very confident person and very gentle and firm, and she would tell us to go and play in another room, obviously where there were no eggs, and she'd say, don't worry about this, mummy will sort it out. So it took away that and anxiety and frustrations, because she managed her emotions well, that helped us to keep our emotions intact and safe. So that I will forever be grateful with her level of maturity and the way in which she protected us emotionally on those occasions, because it didn't just happen once, it happened more than once. And when you think about eggs, you think about how sticky they are, right? Yeah, so could you imagine how many times she had to wash that window down? And I believe that probably happened about, I imagine that would have happened about 3 or 4 times. It's not the sort of thing we speak about as a family because it's quite depressing. But it's something we're very aware of, you know, and that wasn't the only time we experienced that type of racial abuse. I remember walking on the street once and somebody spitting at us. I remember some walking on the roads and somebody throwing an egg at us. This is in the 70s, going into 70s and 80s, and other overt racial abuse. And although political correctness came in, which was rightly so, there was also a worry and concern for me that racism was still there and still inherently there. It was just showing itself in different ways. And we see that today, really. We see that in every area to do with life, where Black people are, unfortunately, us experiencing different levels of inequality. If it's not us directly, it could be our family, our friends, people in our community, people we know of. So me becoming a politician, me becoming a social worker, first of all, and then a counsellor, and different career choices is all about wanting to improve life for people, where people are experiencing different levels of discrimination, injustice, whether it's poverty, whatever it may be, and for our people, but for all people, because I don't want anybody to suffer, and I'm sure you don't either.
So that was really, really powerful. And it just shows that the remarkable person you are, and even the remarkable nature of your mother.
Thank you.
Which is what I read in the biography. I'd like to ask you, because I'm really interested to know, who were some of your role models growing up? Because you're a role model to so many young men and young women within the BAME community. It'd just be nice to find out who inspired you.
Yeah, I always find that question quite challenging. And the reason being is because I didn't grow up in a political household, you know, where family members were a single parent household as well. And I suppose my mum would have been my biggest influencer in my life, as it is for most children, their parents. And some of that was around her kindness and generosity to people that are in poverty. So she is my inspiration, without a doubt. But when I was a teenager, I read Maya Angelou's books, and and I read it from I Know Why Cage Birds Sing down to Singing and Swinging and Getting Merry Like Christmas, and I read them, and she went through so much, resilient, and I think in writing the books was also very therapeutic, but letting us know that when we do face these adversities, we've got to use those experiences to help us to keep climbing rather than to allow it to pull us down. So that was inspiring. I'd also say that my uncles were big inspirations to me growing up. You know, my uncles came in during the Windrush era, full of life, full of laughter, and full of games. And one uncle in particular did speak about politics, my Uncle Clifton, who's still around now. And he still does speak about politics, but there was another uncle that when I was in my 20s, that all we ever spoke about was politics. So I suppose there were some influences to some degree there as well. I think that's it, really. Who influenced my life? Obviously, in later years, I grew to learn a little bit more about the civil through studies, really, and through chosen studies, not naturally through education.
Maiden speech, Janet Daby.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the chance to speak in this debate. I'm both humbled and very proud to be here. I thank my constituents in Lewisham East for giving me this opportunity, as well as my family and my wonderful husband for their patience and understanding over the last few months. And continued patience, probably. I will respect tradition by thanking two of my predecessors, Bridget Prentice and Heidi Alexander. The unwavering support and encouragement I've had from these phenomenal women amplifies the adage, lift as you climb. Bridget was the MP for Lewisham East for 18 years, from 1992 to 2010. She is still a resident, well respected and well known for her community spirit, straight talking, humour. And I thank Bridget for her belief in me. Of course, I wish to pay tribute to my predecessor, Heidi Alexander. She was, as you know, an incredibly hard-working, approachable and dedicated advocate here. She was key to the community campaign that saved Lewisham Hospital A&E services, and as Shadow Secretary of State for Health, she was vocal in the junior doctors' dispute. She was also passionate and outspoken about the need for us to stay in the single market, a view shared by many in Lewisham, where 70% of us voted to remain, and we in Lewisham East will not tolerate a hard Brexit. Yeah. I thank Heidi for her dedication as a public servant, and I'm sure you will join me in wishing her well in her new role as Deputy Mayor for London Transport.
As well. If you've got good people around you, then you've got people that are also taking care of you. So have good people around you, people that are going to build you up, that people that are for you and not against you. But people who you think that maybe are against you, then still befriend them, and don't ever show anybody, you know, that you're let me try and get this right. I think it's about not putting your back up against other people. All right. You know, there's a saying, I think it's scripture, a gentle word turns away wrath. Yeah. So you need to know when is the time to be forceful and to speak out and to make a stand and to make it clear that this is the line, don't cross this line. And when is it right to be able to say, actually, there's something more going on here. Let's see how I can change this into something a bit more positive. So sometimes it's not always jumping in with both feet, but it's being quite reflective and being considered. And that's how I try to be, reflective and considered. I don't think I have all the skills. I don't think anybody has all the skills for everything. I find strength from working in a team. People bring different things, different qualities, but different ideas. And I think for me, we're all social beings. And I think it's about bouncing off each other, learning from each other, using each other's skills and abilities. My skill is that I'm quite strategic, and I can relate to different people from different hierarchies, as well as different backgrounds and different ages. I started out in children's work. When you're working with children, they give you no expression sometimes, none whatsoever. You haven't got a clue whether you're saying the right thing or the wrong thing. I keep thinking that I say what I think is right, and that I think is considered, and then I'd stop reading people's expressions, because you have to sometimes, and you have to be secure in yourself. You know, I'm not one of these people that feels you have to step on people to get higher. I think you hold hands, and if you can, you bring people up. They don't want to come up, well, that's up to them, you know. So that's what I would say. But I'd come back to doing your best and listen to others. See what you can learn and glean from others. I also use observational skills a lot to see how others are doing and how I can improve myself. And so I always see it that I'm continually learning and growing. And I think in this society where there's so much change, we have to do that whether we want to or not anyway. Yeah. If we want to be effective, that is.
Thank you so much. Janet, for your amazing answers. Now I'd like to hand over to my co-host, Michelle. It's going to be asking you the rest of the questions. So over to you, Michelle.
Even more questions, hey? That's all right, Michelle. Go on. It's fine. Absolutely fine.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for your time and allowing me to put some questions to you. It's all been really, really interesting, and I guess sitting here listening to you and hearing your career path and so forth, it's been very inspiring. And the question that I have for you is about what advice would you give to young Black or young BAME community who want to go into politics? I've got a daughter who's 16 who she talks, and sometimes I'm like, I have got no idea what direction to send her in, but she clearly is on the ball politically. What advice could you give?
Yeah, young people always, which is great, have lots of views and strong views, and it's good when they have it, if they have it, and it's good that they're speaking out as well. But to have an effective young voice, get them to join the Labour Party, join a political party, join the Labour Party, because that's where you can have these political discussions. And there are young people's groups, there are young people's forums, then societies that she can, or he, if you know, but your daughter in particular, could get involved in, and she will find a home for her political voice there. There's also BAME forums, as well as young people's forums, there's women forums, there's trade union forums. I mean, in the Labour Party, you'll find so many different forums. And if you can't find one, then you can create your own forum. So I'm just saying that there is absolutely loads where she will be able to have a voice. And then you can decide, you know, any young person could then decide whether how far they want to go in politics. Do they just want to help at grassroots level? Do they want to go further politically, whether it's to hold an elected office or not? But when somebody joins a party, encourage them to get involved, whether that is supporting their councillors, supporting their members of parliament, the London Assembly members, and so on. Get them involved with knocking on doors, delivering leaflets, doing some of the grassroots where we need help and support to keep the party going and to make sure we have a voice. But there's opportunities for them to have conversations at the doorstep, as well as having political conversations with members and elected representatives as well. So all those young people out there, whoever is listening to this call, please join a political party. It's not that expensive. You go online and you look for the membership, and then you join your membership. And as soon as you do that, you'll start receiving emails. Read your emails, and if you're invited to something, you may feel a bit shy or maybe intimidated. Push that to one side, go along and see what's going on. Most things are virtual now anyway, so you can just turn off your camera and listen, and you may find yourself wanting to get involved. And if you do, go ahead. And you know, we all have to start somewhere, and don't be afraid of asking silly questions, because if we don't know something, how are we going to find out unless we ask? Or team up with somebody, you know, look for a mentor. I've had so many mentors in my time, and people didn't even know they were mentoring me. And what I mean by that is that I was, you know, learning from what they were doing or saying. So, you know, think of ways in which you can learn, and it can be more formalized, or it doesn't have to be. Okay.
Thank you. That's really informative and helpful. Yes, I'll be having some discussions when she gets home. The next question is about why is promoting a climate of religious tolerance particularly important in contemporary society?
I think sometimes people underestimate how many people really how many people come from religious backgrounds and how many people practice their religion. It means to people in our present day society. And I think so for those people that don't practice a religious for whatever reason, and that's fine too. And it's fine for those people that do practice a religion. Sometimes I think never the twain meet, really, sometimes, and people don't really understand how much people's faith means to them, and how much they draw from that, are encouraged by it, how much strength to their faith. And I remember I recently had a conversation with an education group. It's a group of teachers where they were really arguing for RE to be taught more in schools. And one of the things they were saying is that running up to the time of the exam, not many hours are spent on teaching RE. But what they did say is that young people from BAME backgrounds are more likely to do better in their grades if in RE. And RE, and they made me more aware of this as well, that RE is about tolerance, because you're learning about different religions, different cultures, people from different backgrounds. And what you're doing is you're encouraging for different views and different beliefs. And I think if we have more of this, more of these subjects, then actually this will help to reduce some of the fear and anxiety that's in our society as well. And it will help those young people that are vulnerable to have more knowledge, and for online abuse to be less, and it will help to prevent, some extremism that we see in our country. So we need to be more tolerant, but I don't usually use that word tolerant, but we need to be more aware of different religions. But how do we do this if there's no education about it? So we need the education. And for political parties are very aware that they need to connect with different faith groups, because and we need to listen to them and see what they're saying and how to respond to them, because people vote. And if political parties want to be in government, then they need to know what the faith groups are saying and what they're experiencing and what their demands are. Just like people of no faith.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks. I'm going to go on to the next question, which you kind of touched on earlier, which is how churches work collaboratively to support vulnerable British communities affected by COVID-19. Now, you did say something about that earlier in terms of the group that you'd helped to set up. I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about the churches and how they came together, and the faith groups and so forth, and perhaps non-faith groups, how they supported one another.
So I think churches, as you mentioned earlier, are doing a lot already. I think they've carried on doing a lot all the way through the pandemic. I think they've looked at ways in which they can support their local church communities and the wider communities during this really difficult time. And I know that a lot of churches have lost members, and they've been very active in terms of the funeral arrangements and helping families with that level of bereavement, and with the reduced number of people that are able to attend funerals. So this has all been very much a challenge and very difficult for both churches and both people that have lost loved ones. I actually think that as a country, I don't think people have even grieved enough because of 43,000 people that have currently died, and people not being able to attend funerals or to attend people's homes as much as they would do during these really awful times. So it has been really difficult, and churches and faith groups have done this period. And I know whether it's people having special diets because of different cultural needs, Christians have stepped up, whether it's in the synagogues, and also whether it's within temples, and within the Muslim faith as well. So there's been an immense work going on where communities have been reaching out in the area of compassion and care and food and meeting dietary needs as well, and also trying to prevent isolation. Church of England has this type of telephone calling where they're very aware that not everybody is able to have virtual conversations and meetings and keep in contact like this. I know a lot of elderly people aren't able to do that. So what they do is there's a phone number where old people can dial to, and then there's this 24-hour, conversation that's taking place where people can receive that and enjoy that. So it has been very challenging for lots of different faith groups, but they have been doing a lot. I think my concern is very much for younger people that maybe aren't connected to a faith group, and how they've really coped. I think it's been a lot harder for the young people, not being able to be with their friends and the lockdown. But obviously it's different now. There's varying restrictions in different places. But I really thank all of the churches and faith groups where they've really reached out to their community and really helped during this really difficult time. And I know in the food project that I have championed, there are all people from all different backgrounds that donate food, from all faith or no faith or whatever it may be. They all donate food, because the people that receive that food, again, are people from all different backgrounds. They're not from the food bank that I'm part of. I don't think many of them are from a faith background. I don't know. I'm speculating now. I shouldn't have said that. I don't know. I'm not sure. But they're all from different backgrounds. And really what we see is faith organisations being pivotal in bringing all people together to help each other. And that's when you've got a community that's being effective and working together, regardless of their differences, whatever those differences may be.
Absolutely up there. Let's head to Lewisham with Shadow Minister Janet Daby. Janet Daby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Work Foundation have reported that 58% of workers in the retail sector are women, and these are some of our lowest paid workers. But due to most of them working on part-time or temporary contracts, hundreds and thousands of women working in retail will not even be eligible for redundancy pay. What plans does the Minister have in mind to mitigate the likelihood of disproportionate numbers of women being made redundant with no financial support available to them?
Minister?
The Honourable Lady for that, and as I say, it's so important that we get the economy up and running again. We can only do this by people actually joining and working with us on hands, face space, to make sure that we can reduce the transmission rate and save as many jobs as possible. But clearly we've launched the job support scheme, and that plus universal credit means that the lowest paid employees can have around 80% of their salary covered between those two schemes.
Question.
Wonderful. That's really inspiring, and it's what's the word, ironic, or the career path that you've taken and the different experiences that you've had. What are some of the greatest lessons that you've learned over the course of your career? And I guess I'm starting way back when.
So I suppose for me, the greatest lessons I've learned is not to jump in with 2 feet, not to make sweeping statements unless you've done your research, because you don't want to pull up a tweet and then have to take the tweet down, or make a decision and have to keep on backtracking like this government has done so many times. And I think probably to be aware that I can't please everybody all of the time, and that's what you need to be true to yourself. And you need to speak up for what you believe in as well, or speak up for what other people believe in, and make sure I'm empowering and advocating people correctly. And when I say speak up for what other people believe in, I mean really advocating for them, whether that's to do with things to do with education, immigration status, housing, and so on. But I very much put my support behind my constituents to improve their life and their well-being. And of course, in my shadow role, then I'm very much holding the government to account for the nation and for how our relationship across the globe as well.
Fantastic. I've got one more question, which I feel that you've probably already answered, which was to tell us about the work with Whitefoot and Downham Community Food Projects, which I feel that you've kind of already covered. So I'm going to ask a different question, if that's okay, Micah.
That's fine.
So I'm also a social worker, and I wondered if I may. Is that okay?
It's fine.
Yeah, sure. Fine with me.
Right, brilliant. Thank you. Your thoughts on the current. I don't know how much you are still involved, or how close you are to what's going on in social work. And I just wondered I'm a social worker, I don't know if I said, what are your thoughts on where child protection will be or is going? Yeah. Do you feel that the focus is changing? Do you think we're having to become more streamlined? I don't know what your thoughts are politically on child protection.
So to be fair, I'm just trying to think when I last practiced as a social worker. The last sort of work I did was doing carer annual reviews for foster carers, and this was probably about 4 years ago now, 3-4 years ago. So and then when I was a child protection social worker, it was a very long time ago, and I ended up being a practice manager and a manager of a fostering organisation, an office in a region. So I'm more disconnected from the frontline staff in that respect, all right? In terms of things that I'm aware of to do with social work practice and where we're going, there is still a high percentage of Black children being brought into care, and I think this is a concern as to how we work with families and how we support families and listen to families. Because of obviously the cuts that have been made to local government and to local councils, it puts more pressure on social workers, and it changes the threshold as well, which means that sometimes it can be more risky for social workers working with families as well, and it just puts more pressure on everyone. I've always very much held the view that we need to invest more in preventative work, and we need to invest more in supporting families. When I think about the amount of money that we put into the wraparound care around a child that's in foster care, which we should, it's absolutely right, it's the right thing to do. But I think that if we'd even spent a quarter of that money that we spend on foster carers and the wraparound care, actually supporting that family and helping that family out of poverty, then I think we would see an improvement to children's lives within their own family network and support. Not all children, because where there's the abhorrent abuse, obviously if it's not safe to leave children in a home, then we need to remove them. If it's physical, sexual, obviously. But I think there's a lot more groundwork that can be done with a reinvestment and a refocus of funds and finance. And also I think if there was less pressure on social workers in terms of caseloads, and I think social workers will be able to do more of the preventative work and some of the grassroots work that they'd like to do, rather than a lot of the case management. Now I say that from things that I've observed and watched as a social worker, and I say that in a personal capacity, because I'm not really I'm not to speak, but I'm very much saying that from a personal capacity, that I think we need a real look, and we could do a change into how we do social work altogether.
Thank you. Yeah, I think you've mirrored a lot of my thoughts there. So
oh, okay.
Thank you very much.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.
So in closing,
thank you. No, thank you very much, Michelle Mackay. Thank you for having me. Thank you for gaining as much information as you can from me. You've probably been the ones that have done the most in trying to pull out all my different thoughts on all of these different areas, and asking me how this relates to me personally. So it's been very good for me. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The UN group of experts has concluded that all parties in Yemen, including the Saudi coalition, are violating international law on an ongoing and consistent basis, and that countries like the UK selling arms for use in the conflict is showing blatant disregard for those violations. Can the Minister explain why independent panel of experts is wrong and he is right?
Well, Mr. Speaker, some of this, of course, is subject to ongoing legal proceedings, but I would remind the Honourable Lady, we discussed this at some length last month in the House in relation to an urgent question on this, which I answered. And can I remind her that at all times we follow the consolidated criteria which provide a robust framework by which we assess export licence applications.